When the Marconi crime family decided to take over Marcus Wilson's small neighborhood butcher shop, they thought they were dealing with just another overweight shopkeeper. They couldn't have been more wrong. The morning sun cast long shadows across Bensonhurst as Marcus Wilson unlocked the metal gate of Wilson's Prime Cuts. At 300 pounds, his massive frame moved with surprising grace as he arranged the day's fresh meat display. The neighborhood locals were already gathering outside, waiting for their daily dose of gossip and premium cuts. Mrs. Rodriguez, 72 and sharp as the knives Marcus used, watched him work. "Morning, Tank," she called out, using the nickname the whole neighborhood had given him. "Got any of that good ribeye today?" "Always do for you, Mrs. R," Marcus replied, his voice gentle despite his imposing size. To everyone in the neighborhood, he was just the friendly butcher who'd taken over his uncle's shop 8 years ago after some vague military service. They saw the weight, the slightly labored breathing, the way he sometimes winced when lifting heavy sides of beef. What they didn't see was the way his eyes constantly scanned the street, the way his thick fingers, seemingly clumsy with fat, moved with surgical precision when cutting meat, the way he positioned himself to have clear sightlines to both the front door and the back exit. But the Marconi crime family was about to discover why some habits never truly die. The first sign of trouble came at 10:47 a.m. 3 black Cadillacs pulled up outside Wilson's Prime Cuts, their engines purring with the quiet confidence of expensive machinery. Marcus noticed them immediately, his trained eye cataloging details that would escape civilian notice. New York plates, but not local. Tinted windows. The way they parked to block both ends of the street. These weren't ordinary visitors. And Marcus Wilson was about to face a test he'd been avoiding for 8 long years. The first man who entered was clearly the muscle. 6'4", 250 pounds of solid intimidation in a tailored suit that couldn't quite hide the shoulder holster beneath. His cold blue eyes swept the shop like a predator assessing territory. The second man was different. Smaller, maybe 5'8", but he carried himself with the authority of someone used to giving orders and having them followed without question. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled. His suit probably cost more than most people made in a month. The third man stayed by the door. Younger, nervous, constantly checking his phone, probably new to this kind of work. Mrs. Rodriguez took one look at the trio and grabbed her purse. "I'll come back later, Tank," she said quietly, not making eye contact with the newcomers. Marcus nodded, his expression remaining calm even as his mind shifted into tactical mode. Assess the threat, identify escape routes, note potential weapons. The mental checklist he'd used in hostile territory around the world kicked in automatically. "Morning, gentlemen," Marcus said pleasantly, continuing to arrange cuts of meat behind the counter. "What can I get for you today?" The well-dressed man stepped forward, his smile cold and practiced. "Vincent Marconi," he said, not offering his hand. "I think we need to have a conversation about your business, Mr. Wilson." Marcus's hands stilled for just a moment. The Marconi family. He'd heard the name whispered in the neighborhood. Old-school Brooklyn crime family, the kind that had been running protection rackets since before World War II. They'd been expanding their territory lately, muscling in on legitimate businesses. But they'd chosen the wrong shop, and they had no idea what kind of man they were really dealing with. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We bring you incredible tales like this every single day. Now, back to the story that's about to take a very dangerous turn. "Not much to talk about," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "It's a butcher shop. I sell meat." Vincent's smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. See? That's where you're wrong. This isn't just about meat anymore. This neighborhood, this block, this shop, it's all part of our territory now. And businesses in our territory, well, they have certain obligations. The muscle, Marcus decided to call him Bruno in his head, moved closer to the counter. His jacket fell open slightly, revealing the Glock 19 in his shoulder holster. Amateur move. A professional would have kept it concealed. What kind of obligations? Marcus asked, though he already knew where this conversation was heading. The kind that keep you safe, Vincent replied, running his finger along the glass display case. Beautiful setup you got here. Shame if something happened to it. Fire, break-ins, health department issues. This city can be dangerous for small business owners. Marcus's grip tightened slightly on the bone saw he'd been using. 12 years of military training had taught him to recognize a threat assessment when he heard one. These weren't just local thugs shaking down shop owners. The Marconis were sophisticated, organized, and they'd done their homework. But they'd missed one crucial detail. How much? Marcus asked quietly. Smart man. Vincent nodded approvingly. $2,000 a month. Cash. Every month, no exceptions. My associate here will collect personally. He gestured to Bruno, who cracked his knuckles with theatrical menace. $2,000 a month. Marcus did the math quickly. It would bankrupt the shop within 6 months. This wasn't a protection racket. It was a slow-motion takeover. They'd bleed him dry, then offer to buy the shop for pennies on the dollar. Marcus had two choices: submit to their demands like every other terrified shop owner, or do something that would change everything. The decision he made in the next few seconds would determine not just his fate, but the fate of everyone in the neighborhood. And Vincent Marconi was about to learn why you should never threaten a man with nothing left to lose. And if I refuse? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he was considering compliance. Vincent's expression hardened. You seem like a reasonable man, Mr. Wilson. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. But just so we understand each other, he nodded to Bruno, who casually swept his arm across the counter, sending packages of premium steaks crashing to the floor. The meat scattered across the dirty linoleum, hundreds of dollars worth of inventory ruined in seconds. That's just a small demonstration, Vincent continued as if nothing had happened. Next time, it might be your equipment, or your windows, or... He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Marcus stared at the scattered meat, his jaw clenched. In his mind, he was calculating angles, distances, response times. Bruno was standing too close to the counter. Textbook mistake. The nervous kid by the door kept looking at his phone instead of watching for threats. Vincent thought his expensive suit and reputation made him untouchable. They had no idea they were standing 3 feet away from a man who had eliminated high-value targets in 6 different countries. But Marcus Wilson the butcher couldn't do what Marcus Wilson the Navy SEAL could do. Not yet. Not without consequences that would destroy the quiet life he'd built here. I need time to think about it, Marcus said finally. Vincent checked his Rolex, another display of wealth and power. You've got 48 hours. Bruno here will be back Friday morning for your answer and your first payment. As the 3 men turned to leave, Vincent paused at the door. Oh, and Mr. Wilson, don't even think about calling the police. Half of them are on our payroll, and the other half know better than to interfere with family business. The black Cadillacs pulled away as smoothly as they'd arrived, leaving Marcus alone with the scattered meat and the weight of their threat. What Vincent Marconi didn't know was that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his criminal career. Because Marcus Wilson wasn't just any shopkeeper, and the Marconis were about to discover exactly what happens when you corner a Navy SEAL. For several minutes, he stood motionless behind the counter. Then, with practiced efficiency, he began cleaning up the mess. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, the muscle memory of a man who'd learned to stay calm under pressure. As he worked, his mind raced through possibilities. The Marconis weren't going to disappear. This wasn't a one-time shakedown. They were moving into the neighborhood permanently. Other business owners would be getting similar visits. The elderly Italian couple who ran the grocery store next door. The young family who'd just opened the dry cleaner across the street. Marcus had spent 8 years building a life here. 8 years of therapy, medication, and careful routine to manage the PTSD that had ended his military career. 8 years of being Tank, the friendly butcher, instead of Commander Wilson, the killer. But Vincent Marconi had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And what happened next would remind everyone why Navy SEALs are called the deadliest warriors on the planet. That evening, after closing the shop, Marcus climbed the narrow stairs to his apartment above the store. The space was Spartan, a single bedroom, basic kitchen, living room with a television, and one comfortable chair. The only decoration was a framed photo on the mantel. Marcus in full dress uniform, 20 pounds lighter and 20 years younger. Accepting a commendation from a Navy admiral. He opened the closet and moved aside hanging clothes to reveal a floor safe hidden behind a false panel. His fingers worked the combination from memory, the date of his first successful mission as team leader. Inside the safe were documents, cash, and a single metal case. Marcus lifted out the case and set it on his kitchen table. The combination lock opened with a soft click. Nestled in custom foam padding were items from his other life. Night vision goggles, a ceramic knife that wouldn't set off metal detectors, a GPS tracker smaller than a coin, a secure satellite phone, and wrapped in oiled cloth, a Sig Sauer P226 with 3 full magazines. Marcus hadn't touched these items in 8 years, but as he held the familiar weight of the pistol, 12 years of deadly training came flooding back. The Marconis thought they were dealing with a helpless shop owner. Tomorrow, they would learn the truth about Commander Marcus Ghost Wilson. The next morning brought new challenges. Word had spread about the Marconis' visit. The neighborhood's invisible network of gossips and observers had been watching. Mrs. Rodriguez approached his counter with worried eyes. "Tank, honey, you need to be careful," she whispered, glancing around nervously. The Torino family tried to stand up to the Marconis last year. Their restaurant burned down 2 weeks later. Insurance called it an electrical fire, but everybody knew. Other customers shared similar stories throughout the day. Business owners who'd refused protection and faced escalating harassment. Shop windows broken. Delivery trucks vandalized. Family members followed home from school. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. But Marcus had faced longer odds in worse places. The difference was that this time he was fighting for more than just mission objectives. He was fighting for home. And Vincent Marconi was about to learn why you never, ever threaten a Navy SEAL's home. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. Marcus opened the shop at his usual time, arranged the meat display with his usual care, and waited. The Marconis would be punctual. Men like Vincent Marconi valued precision in their business dealings. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the black Cadillacs returned. This time, only Vincent and Bruno entered the shop. The third man, the nervous one, stayed in the car. Vincent wore a different suit, but the same cold smile. "Mr. Wilson," he said pleasantly, "I trust you've had time to consider our proposal." Marcus wiped his hands on his apron and looked directly at Vincent. For a moment, the weight he carried, The soft appearance he'd cultivated, the gentle demeanor he'd maintained for 8 years, all of it fell away. Vincent saw something in those eyes that made him take an involuntary step backward. Something cold, something deadly, something that whispered of midnight operations and enemies who simply disappeared. "I've considered it," Marcus said quietly, "and my answer is no." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bruno's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, but Vincent raised a finger to stop him. "That's disappointing," Vincent said, his voice no longer pleasant. "I was hoping we could handle this like civilized men." "So was I," Marcus replied. Vincent studied him for a long moment, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "You're not what you appear to be, are you, Mr. Wilson?" Marcus said nothing. "No matter," Vincent continued. "Whatever you think you are, whatever you think you can do, you're still just one fat man against an entire organization. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Marcus smiled then, a cold, predatory expression that Vincent had never seen on the face of a neighborhood butcher. "Actually, Vincent, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. The question is, do you?" What happened next would be talked about in the neighborhood for years to come. But more importantly, it would send a message through the criminal underworld that some people should never be underestimated. Especially not a 300-pound butcher with 12 years of Navy SEAL training. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Bruno went for his gun first, a trained response to a perceived threat. But Marcus had been watching his body language, reading the micro-expressions that preceded violent action. The big man's hand was still reaching for his holster when Marcus vaulted over the counter with surprising speed for someone his size. The bone saw in Marcus's hand caught Bruno across the wrist with surgical precision. Not lethal, but devastating to grip strength. The Glock clattered to the floor as Bruno screamed and clutched his injured arm. Vincent was reaching for his own weapon when Marcus's other hand, the one that looked soft and weak from years of inactivity, clamped around his throat with crushing force. The crime boss found himself lifted off his feet and slammed against the refrigerated display case. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the violence he'd just unleashed. "You're going to walk out of here. You're going to leave this neighborhood alone. And you're going to spread the word that Wilson's prime cuts is off limits." Vincent tried to speak, but Marcus's grip was cutting off his air supply. The butcher leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. 12 years, Vincent. 12 years in the teams. Fallujah, Kabul, places that don't officially exist. I've eliminated targets who were better trained, better armed, and a hell of a lot smarter than you. He released his grip, letting Vincent drop to his knees, gasping. He released his grip, letting Vincent drop to his knees, gasping. "The neighborhood knows what happened here," Marcus continued, straightening his apron with the same casual precision he used to arrange meat displays. "Word will spread. People will talk. Your reputation for being untouchable just got seriously damaged." Vincent struggled to his feet, his face red from oxygen deprivation and humiliation. In 30 seconds, everything he thought he knew about power dynamics had been shattered by a man he'd dismissed as a harmless shopkeeper. The war for Bensonhurst had just begun, and the Marconis had already lost the first battle. "This isn't over," he wheezed. "Yes, it is," Marcus replied matter-of-factly. "Because if you come back, if you send anyone else, if you so much as drive down this street again, I won't be so gentle next time." Vincent looked around the shop, at the scattered blood, at his injured enforcer, at the calm, deadly man wearing a blood-stained apron. For the first time in 20 years of criminal activity, he was genuinely afraid. The Marconis left as they'd arrived, in expensive cars with tinted windows. But this time, they left behind their aura of invincibility. Marcus cleaned the blood from his hands and reopened the shop. Within an hour, Mrs. Rodriguez was back, buying her usual order as if nothing had happened. Other customers followed throughout the day, their relief palpable. Word spread through the neighborhood's invisible network. Tank the Butcher had stood up to the Marconis, and won. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Vincent Marconi's pride wouldn't allow him to let this insult stand. He'd be back, with more men, better planning, and deadlier intent. That was fine. Marcus Wilson had spent 12 years preparing for exactly this kind of war. The only difference was that this time he was fighting for something more important than any mission he'd ever been given. He was fighting for home, and there was nothing more dangerous than a Navy SEAL protecting what he loved. The real war was about to begin. As evening approached and Marcus prepared to close the shop, he reflected on the day's events. The careful balance he'd maintained for 8 years between his past and his present, between who he'd been and who he was trying to become, had been shattered in a moment of violence. But sometimes, Marcus thought, as he locked the door and turned off the lights, some things were worth fighting for. Some lines couldn't be allowed to be crossed. The Marconis had made their choice when they threatened his neighborhood, his customers, his home. Now they were about to learn why you should never corner a Navy SEAL, even a retired one who sells meat for a living. The war for Bensonhurst was just beginning, and Marcus Wilson, tank to his friends, commander to his enemies, was ready. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We prepare a new story for you every day. Hit the like button and share your thoughts with us in the comments. You can help your friends discover these exciting narratives by sharing our stories on your social media accounts. See you in our next story.